Thanks so much for joining us for Accessibility in Publishing, Removing Barriers for Professionals with Disabilities. We will be joined today by wonderful panelists speaking to a number of questions and discussion points around all things obstacles and barriers for disabled writers, the importance of accessibility, how disability is written, and lots more. My name is Alma. I have brown and blue hair. I'm wearing a colorful tie-dye shirt. I've got piercings, including some on my face. Bright eyes, a big smile, and my pronouns are she, ella. If y'all would introduce yourselves, please.
Hi, I'm Ashley N.Y. Sheesley. You can call me Ash. I have brown eyes and, well, it's purple hair, but it looks pretty brown in this lighting. I'm wearing a blue shirt with some white lace doily thingies on it, and don't have any piercings. I'm not that cool. Um, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, I am Dianna Gunn. I am a white lady who also has purple hair, which does actually look purple in this lighting, although not nearly as vibrant on Zoom as it does in real life, which is disappointing. Uh, my pronouns are she, her. Oh, I'm also wearing really cool earrings, but the Zoom virtual background makes it hard to tell. They have these little like black hole beads. They're really good. Uh, and yeah, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Lara Ameen. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a white and Egyptian woman with dark brown hair, brown eyes, glasses, wearing some little bit of reddish lipstick, chapstick, and I am wearing a purple shirt, sitting in a power wheelchair, and I am very glad to be here.
I am honored to be here with all of you. Thank you each for being here. We're going to go ahead and dive in. All right, so for my panelists today, first question, and we'll, just for the audience's benefit, we're going to approach this panel as a round robin style panel. So each of our panelists will sort of pop in with their thoughts and opinions and share about their experiences as they wish. Our first question is, what are some examples of obstacles you've faced as a professional with disabilities within publishing, and how have you worked to counter them, or what accommodations have made writing more accessible for you?
Can talk about this one a little bit. As someone with a energy limiting disability, sometimes it can be really difficult to even just make the have the energy and the ability to write, especially with like throw in like photophobia and like chronic pain or whatever. So I think finding ways for me to be able to kind of carve out time and like spoons, and sometimes that means that I don't do the dishes all week, but just finding the way to make it happen, and sometimes it also means that it doesn't happen, and being okay with that, I think has given me a lot of like freedom to be able to like listen to my body and listen to my story as it goes. And then with photophobia, I've got some migraine glasses that are really nice for when things get really bad. I have a desk that rolls over my bed so I can work on it in bed, but I also mostly just lay on my bed and put it on my lap and like put it on my chest and just right there, and just finding ways to make it work for me. Within publishing itself, um, I've I've noticed that well, the first time I tried to query Child of the Dragon, I was not sick, and my chronically ill characters were much more side characters, and so they weren't in my query. I got a full request really quick. Then they told me the book wasn't ready, and that was around the same time I got sick. And so I took some time off to like figure out what works for me again, and then also to rewrite it. And when I rewrote it, I centered disability and tried to query it again, and did not get nearly as much enthusiasm out of it. Um, but my thoughts with it were kind of that I wanted to, if if a publishing professional did not want my book because of the disability rep, then I didn't want to work with them either. And um, I queried a middle grade this last year, and it very much has disability rep in it. And I saw a lot more agents this go around who are excited about it, just excited about the disability rep specifically. And I think that just keep going and trying to find the champions, because the champions exist.
Yeah, jumping on that energy limiting thing, I think realistically the biggest barrier for me isn't so much within publishing, it's the fact that I live in capitalism and I need a completely different job to survive. Uh, I and like yes, there is also a fact that, readers expect books at a certain pace and there's so much pressure to produce quickly, but that wouldn't necessarily be an issue for me if I didn't need to have another job to survive, because I can write fast. If I had, that extra 20, 30, 40 hours a week that I spend doing my quote unquote day job. I say quote unquote because I'm a freelancer. Uh if I had all of that time to write my books, I would probably have 3 times as many published by now. But that's unfortunately not the reality I live in. And while that is difficult for everyone to navigate, it's not easy for anyone to, have a job and also write books on the side. It becomes that much harder when you have disabilities, especially disabilities that actively limit your energy. Or in my case, it's very much inconsistent. I waffle between I'm the most productive person you've ever met in your life and I'm a blob. Um, and realistically, the way that I've gotten around it is, and I've only gotten part way around it, is I am freelance for that exact reason, because it means that I can control my schedule. I have the ability to, make time for writing more easily and choose, if I know that this particular day job task isn't going to require as much energy, I can, move it to a lower energy time of day and spend my better hours writing. Um, and that's been the main thing, is just having that control over my schedule. And I should also add that I'm in Canada, and a big part of the reason I can do that is because while we our universal healthcare is limited, it does exist, so I don't need to have a full-time job to have health insurance.
I think what the point that Diana brought up is really vital, because I'm also freelance. I also do primarily freelance work, and as someone with both an MFA and a PhD, I would love to, to be more in academia, but to do teaching and to teach creative writing at the university level, screenwriting at the university level, and use that and kind of sort of combine that with publishing and with the other things that I do. But it's really difficult because of capitalism, and because so much of publishing and the entertainment industry and academia is so ableist. So it becomes easier to be, to do freelancing, because I can set my own schedule. I have, as part of cerebral palsy, I have chronic constipation, and I have some other chronic, issues, also immunocompromised. I'll probably talk about this again in a later question, but having, remote work and flexibility and stuff with a schedule definitely makes it easier. I'm definitely not a person who writes every day. I don't write every day at all. I haven't written in my creative projects actually in a really long time. But I think with, like, I also wanted to piggyback off of what Ashley was saying, because this is my second time I'm querying my PhD dissertation novel. Actually, the reason it's a novel at all is in some ways because of capitalism, because of my original, like, my dissertation was initially, I mean, it was a script that I said I was going to adapt into a novel, because I knew that the script, even having written so many scripts, and I'm a screenwriter and that's my background, I knew that, as breaking into the entertainment industry is even more difficult than publishing. So I thought, well, if I have it as a novel, then at least I can query it. And even if it dies in the trenches, at least I can give it a chance. Like the story itself, I can give a chance. But as a script, just having it as a script, it's probably not going to have that much of a chance because people take chances on querying, debut writers and publishing a lot more than they take on a fledgling TV writer with no credits. So it's really, really difficult. So I started querying my dissertation novel. It'll be at the recording of this panel. Like by the time this panel goes up, I'll have been querying for about a year. So it's definitely been exhausting, and I've sent out like 100 queries. So I think my motivation comes from you just gotta keep going. I haven't gotten any specific querying feedback that's been negative. I've gotten some very positive. On Fools, I've gotten some very positive feedback. So I haven't gotten anything specifically negative in regards to like disability. But my two main characters are both disabled. One's physically disabled and one has mental health issues, and I wanted to like contrast the two in a fantasy novel because that really doesn't exist a lot, and seeing like the contractions that each character has. But I think I don't know because my rejections haven't been like super specific if they're just rejecting it because it doesn't fit their list or if it's because of more ableism where it's like, oh, they don't see it. And I think it could be either one, but I'd rather take a chance on querying it than like knowing it's probably not going to survive as a script at all. Even though I've had some luck with it. But I think that like ableism and even racism, because my one of my characters is Egyptian and disabled and I'm part Egyptian. And so like having like a queer disabled Egyptian character in a fantasy novel and I'm like agents seeing that and they might be like, oh, that's too much or something. So like I kind of would say you kind of always have to be conscious of like doing the next thing, like having the next thing, which I am also working on. But for those of us with disabilities and chronic illnesses, it could come out very slowly, or we work on other projects. We work on short stories, we work on, nonfiction, other things. I work on scripts, I work on other things. So my next novel, hopefully, may be ready to query next year, but we don't know because on a disability schedule on Crip Time, it's gonna be very different. So I think it's just be good to yourself, be gentle to yourself, and don't worry so much about your output as a disabled person, but just take care of yourself first, and the writing will be there.
Yeah, I'm loving that you all are perfectly segueing actually into my next question for you. I'm hearing each of you talk about through your own experience as disabled individuals, professionals, writers, um, and as creatives, talking about, right, the importance of flexibility for each of you. And that might mean slightly different things in each of your circumstances, the importance of safety, right? Whether that's remote work, or working as a freelancer where you don't have to expose yourself if you're immunocompromised or whatever it may be. So my question is, what accommodations, whether those or other ones, would make the industry more accessible for you?
I think a big thing is if I would love to have more publishing professionals, and I know there's already some really incredible ones out there, but who are more flexible with deadlines and schedules and things like that, allowing authors who might have a dynamic disability where they're fine one day but then really sick the next, or who can have really unpredictable health schedules. And I think that being able to have authors be allowed to be a little bit more flexible with their schedule would be really beneficial. And it would be beneficial for able-bodied authors too, because everyone can get sick and things can happen like that. I think other things that I've been thinking about is, I think, across the board, like as readers, it would be really great, like readers and professionals, it would be really great if we were more accepting of signed books that were not signed, but were like stamped or embossed or had some other sort of way to allow that just, I mean, even like John Green now has a chronic shoulder injury from trying to sign all those copies of Everything's Tuberculosis. And I know there's a big uproar a few years ago because some author had to come out and say that they have arthritis and were not able to sign their book. But when it turned out, when people found out it was a stamp, there was this big uproar. And I think um, as like a bookish community, we need to be more accepting uh, of like alternatives to those sort of things that still have the like unique special, this author touched the book kind of thing, but that is much more joint friendly. I also think along that same line of would be like really encouraging continual masking at signing events and other bookish events and festivals and conventions and conferences. I think that would go a long way to making the industry as a whole more accessible.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. I was gonna say, definitely have mask required author events. I think I would go to a lot more. I can't drive anyway because of my disabilities, but like I think if I could find someone to take me, I would feel safer going to, more like we just had in my area because I'm in SoCal. I'm not in Los Angeles, but I am in SoCal. We just had the Y'all West here, and I was like, oh, I wanted to go, but like I had some other conflicts, but I was also like, how safe is it gonna be? Because, there's not gonna be a lot of people masking, and it just makes me like feel bad because not just feel bad for me, but like I feel bad for the authors, like, if they get sick and then they can't do more events and stuff. So I think we should have mask required events for authors and also for readers, if readers have like book clubs and stuff, because there's a lot of book clubs and things that are organized by people in bookstores. And I know like one of my favorite indie bookstores that I finally got to visit like a year ago. It has like book club events, and I'm like, well, I would feel a lot safer if I could go, like if they were mask required. I also think that we should have like that publishing professionals should be like a little bit lenient, especially if for like chronic illness and disability stuff, for extended deadlines, be okay with knowing that they signed on a disabled author, um that we should have be able to have like deadlines, like extended time, sort of like when we were back in elementary through high school and had to request extended time for exams, same kind of thing. It's because being in publishing or is just like any other job, and in order to produce that kind of work, the kind of work for the job, so the fiction, the novel that we're working on, to a certain standard, we need that extra time and that space, and to really voice that, hey, I need, that accommodation. Or maybe they might need some accommodation with their computer or with, lighting or with sitting or, something like that. So people don't think about like, maybe different cushions or a seating arrangement or like, how a computer is set up. People were even talking about that with me because I was having some neck pain and shoulder pain. So I had a doctor talk with me about like, have you considered how you set up your computer? And because he knows I work from home and do that kind of stuff. So I think if publishing professionals were more aware of that, and like Ashley was saying, that it would also benefit non-disabled people as well. Like that's something that would benefit anybody. So I think those things would definitely help. And as I mentioned before, also remote work is a must in any industry, not just publishing. I think it's more common in publishing because a lot of agents and editors do end up working from home. Like because I'm in like multiple industries, like the entertainment industry is not very fond of that when it comes to like TV writers and screenwriters. But I think with publishing, there is a little more leniency when you have these different roles. But I think it's important to bring up because not every role is remote, but there are so many roles in publishing that could be that aren't. So I think that needs to be explored more and advocated for more. And also querying, like I've seen agents like on their query manager form like that. If query manager isn't accessible for someone who's querying, feel free to email the agent, or there might be another way to have the disabled writer access the agent to make it more accessible for them, because every querying author's process is going to be different too. So I would say those things would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big things really were covered. A lot of it is just being flexible with deadlines and schedules and having events where masks are required, ma where masks are provided. And like that doesn't even necessarily mean that like you can't have a drink. There are sip mask valves, which I've been, on a quest to get everyone to adopt, which are like these little vacuum sealed things that you can just add to any disposable mask that you're already using, and they come with their own straws, which are compatible with them. And yes, it is an extra expense, but it keeps you that much safer, and it keeps the people around you that much safer. And I think it is like 1% less safe than just wearing a mask without one, but like that's still way, way safer than not wearing a mask at all. So I really think like you can wear a mask and still have fun and even still have drinks. And I think that our society at large needs to get that through its thick skull, and that really needs to become a known thing in publishing, something because I think a lot of people simply don't know about that. And I think a lot of the pushback on masks is that people don't realize there are tools like that that can allow you to wear a mask and still have your little drinky drinks and have your fun. Like, yes, eating is a whole other issue, but like a lot of book events, if you're going to an hour-long signing, you don't necessarily need to have a snack. You might want to have, some water with you because, thirst happens, but um yeah, there's ways to do things that are safer, and I think that's a big thing. And also just like in-person events can be very overstimulating as well, and something that I've started to see happening at cons. I should say I've started to hear about happening at cons. I never leave my house. Um, is, things like quiet rooms or even dark rooms where people can just go and chill when they're feeling overstimulated. Like there's so many things that we can do to make events friendlier to a wider range of people. And you know, I do think that yes, there is malicious ableism, but a lot of it is just ignorance. People don't realize that there are solutions, and so we need to be actively talking about them and bringing them to the forefront.
Absolutely. I love that y'all are speaking to giving folks ideas about how to have fun while being safe, keeping other people safe, staying hydrated. I just ordered some of my first sip valves, so I was excited to hear you talking about those, Diana, since I am going on a flight next month, right? I had to figure out how do I, as someone with POTS, stay hydrated, keep my salt intake up, and still stay safe with COVID and RSV and right? And all the things, all the plagues that all the people are carrying right now. Um, and how accommodations benefit everybody, right? It's not just disabled folks who are benefited by these kinds of accommodations, but if a non-disabled author gets ill and they have the opportunity to extend a deadline, that benefits them, right? If someone is at a con and is having sensory overload and there's a quiet space or a dark space where they can go and stop being overstimulated, that's good for everybody, regardless of ability level. So all of that said, I'm loving this conversation, and I want to take it a little bit further. because I do feel like affordability plays into accessibility as well. And I know that this is a topic that you all are really passionate about. So I'm wondering, from your perspectives, how can the industry build affordability into efforts to increase access? And like Dianna just mentioned, right? The ability of attending an event where masks are provided would be one example of how to do that. But I'll hand it over to y'all.
Yeah, so this is near and dear to my heart. I actually run an organization called Weeknight Writers, which is devoted entirely to creating affordable and accessible events for writers. And a big thing is, I mean, make it virtual if you can. I understand that there are, reasons why pe certain people prefer in-person events, and obviously like a book signing can't be virtual, but there are so many things where we can have it be virtual. This conference is virtual. And we can do virtual workshops. We can do all of these things virtually, and that reduces the cost dramatically because you can charge less because you don't need to be renting a space. B, people don't need to travel to come to you. So that's huge. And similarly, just make every job we possibly can in publishing remote. Because the fact of the matter is, not only are some jobs in publishing still not remote, but the ones that aren't in the big five are concentrated in places like New York, where it is just extraordinarily expensive to live. They are, and they don't pay well. The reality is that the way the big five are set up is it's not just disabled people who are left out. It is anyone who does not have independent wealth or a willingness to live in poverty and eat macaroni and cheese for decades, because these big publishing houses are centered in places like New York is really where a lot of them are. And it's just stupendously expensive. And, a lot of cons, they happen in big cities that are, it's expensive to get to, it's expensive to stay in a hotel. And it's just not realistic for people who are poor. And unfortunately, the reality is that a very high percentage of disabled people are poor because our society is not set up to accommodate us. And, we might freelance and have the schedule we want, but a lot of us freelancers are not making a good living with that schedule we want. Some of us are. Um, and, there are people like me who my situation is I'm making a good living because I live in a rent-controlled apartment that I've lived in for 10 years. And if I had to move tomorrow, I would simply become homeless. Uh, so, there's a lot of variation there, but the reality is that most disabled people are, in some form of precarious employment or unemployment. And in order for us to be able to attend these things, we need them to, realistically, in most cases, they need to be virtual or have a remote component. And failing that, we need to have things like scholarships and bursaries and travel funds, and they need to be available for people who aren't already, at a high level so that people can get in on the ground floor.
I want to echo that, but I also want to add that I think it would be really, really nice if a lot more of these conferences and conventions and events allowed for like same day cancellations. Because like it's so hard as someone with a like dynamic disability to like be like, yes, I am going to fork over 50 to 300 plus bucks, assuming I don't have to fly somewhere and stay the night, and then like get to the day of the event and be like, I am too sick to move. And just like, I either push through and make myself worse and don't enjoy any of the event, or I like cut my losses and just eat that expense, or like just don't go to the event, like don't ever like purchase tickets. And I think it would be so much more accessible if more people were okay with refunds and or like, yeah, just like being able to like get your tickets refunded if you are just not feeling good, like or just like can't make it for any reason, like you're trying to get out the door and your kid is having a hissy fit and you missed your flight. Like people should like refunds should be a thing. That's all.
Agreed with everything said, especially with remote work and accommodations around conferences. I used to go to, this was before COVID, I wouldn't go now. I wish, I miss it. I used to go to San Diego Comic-Con every year for like 6 years. I went from 2013 to 2019, and it was really fun. And a lot of authors go there. It's not just entertainment industry people or comics book people, but there are also authors who go down there as well. And I would take the train down and then stay. Like, I wouldn't stay overnight because I couldn't stay because I need caregiving. So that's a whole other thing that I will talk about in a second too, in terms of like conferences and residencies and stuff. But I would go down there for like a day and then take the train back. But it's become very expensive. And also, like, when you go down there, you have to account for like other things that you might not have expected to pay for, or maybe not being able to, like, Ashley was saying, not being able to get a refund on certain things last minute, or just not being able to go. Like, if you have some kind of conference, just not being able to go for a day and not feeling that it will count against you. The other thing I wanted to bring up, which I kind of just did, is I am someone who needs caregiving. At, like, if I were to go to a conference or something that was like a multi-day or some kind of event, um, that I would need caregiving, and a lot of people won't factor in, the extra expense of the caregiver, so they'll just pay for the one person and not like the extra person, and it costs a lot more money. So like, I've never gone to, no, that's a lie. I did go to a conference in 2015. I went to at American University. They had a film. It was a film. It was an academic conference, but like, people don't, like, I wouldn't do that now because of COVID and other things. But people don't take into consideration that it's not just people who have kids or who are taking care of elderly parents or whatever, but when you are disabled, and are the person that needs the care, what are the extra expenses that come in, or what happens if your caregiver gets sick last minute, or you get sick last minute or something, and like, those extra things aren't really factored in, which is why masking is so important at big events like conferences and these things, because, or why remote options are thing, because if someone was planning to go in person and now they can't, maybe they can have a remote option where they could still do it from home or whatever. So to even just have the remote options available, even if it is an in-person conference, because I see the appeal of in-person conferences. However, I'm not someone, because I'm immunocompromised, who feels comfortable doing that. So having remote options at all times for all conferences. Thank God writehive is a virtual conference. And I did send a private email or message to Justine, and I was like, thank you for keeping it remote, because like, it matters, it really does, because like, I don't do conferences anymore, and I'm someone balancing academia, publishing, and TV writing, and it's like, I should be going to conferences, but I can't because of multiple reasons, and it's just not talked about. So like, how can we make it safer for all kinds of people, and less cost and stuff? And I see these wonderful writing residencies too. Like, it's also with writing residencies, not just conferences, and I was like, oh, I wish I can go, but like, it's not wheelchair accessible, or it's just not accessible at all. Like, I need more than a ramp. I need bars in a bathroom. I need an accessible roll-in shower. I need to take a caregiver, whether it's my mom or a friend or somebody. Like, I need all these things, and those expenses aren't accounted into, something that I would usually do. And it becomes more like, I've done other events pre-COVID too, and it just, the expenses just add up, and people don't realize that. So I would say, have that awareness, so you have virtual and remote options because of those things.
Absolutely. I love the way I feel like I'm just fawning over y'all's answers as a fellow disabled person of right. I love that you're talking about the ways that are fairly simple logistically, financially, et cetera, for folks who are hosting events to make them more accessible and safer. I love that y'all are talking about, I'm sure this phrase is familiar to you, but right, the disability tax, right? The extra expenses incurred by folks who are disabled, whether that's a direct expense or the indirect expense of having to buy your own N95 to attend a conference that's really important to you, or book signing, or whatever it might be. And what I feel like you all are getting at, I just want to name really quickly for our audience, is why this should matter to everyone, regardless of their physical, mental, psychological ability, or any disabilities that they may or may not have, right? This impacts everybody and can benefit everyone, as you all were speaking to before. And with that, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about. Um, Right. What are some active things, maybe not just within the publishing industry or not just for folks who are hosting cons, but what can folks do to support advancing accessibility, whether they're readers, reviewers, maybe they do work in the publishing industry, right? Fellow writers who are not disabled themselves, right? How could your colleagues support you? As well as folks who maybe are working in the publishing industry, whether that's big pub or small pub.
I mean, a big thing for like the bookish space is just like read disabled books, read disabled authors, and like read the books that have like disabled characters as main characters in all sorts of settings. Read disability in fantasy, read it in sci-fi, in dystopia, in contemporary, in romance, and support the ones that are like doing so with like nuance and sensitivity to it, and like that like don't just have a like cure narrative or anything like that, or something like that, but just, I mean, if publishing can see that disabled voices are wanted, then they'll make it, then they'll focus more on it. And I mean, it's going to take a lot to convince them that we're worth investing in, and we're worth uh, uh w- making things accessible for. But I mean, starting there, I think is going to be just is huge.
Yeah, definitely like having people read works by disabled authors and supporting disabled, finding ways to support disabled authors, but also like having, non-disabled people contribute to scholarships and, monetary resources that support disabled authors, whether it's like a GoFundMe or like, different scholarship funds put on by different writing organizations or different things so that a, disabled author can afford to go to a conference or go, something, or even towards self-publishing their book, or, something like that, or um, just having that monetary support if they can afford it. I think that's also important. I think just also spreading the word on social media. Hey, I read this really great book, with a disabled character written by a disabled author. You should read it too, or like text your friends. Like that's, you don't have to put it on social media. Like text your friends being like, hey, I read this great book. And leaving reviews on all the platforms. Yes, Amazon does matter. I'm not someone who does like leave reviews, but I do, as someone who reads a ton, I will text my friends and be like, hey, I really enjoyed this book. You should check it out. Da da da. So get it amongst your friends who are bookish or who you think might enjoy certain types of books that you're reading. Hey, I really enjoyed this. Please read, or please get it from your local library or indie or whatever. So that's another way to do it, and might not necessarily cost you money because you're just informing another person, hey, I really enjoyed this. Or even doing events, at a local library, or doing a virtual event at a library, something like that would also help, or like a book club or something. that could help as well. I think just anything to boost disabled voices, and not just during Disability Pride Month or certain awareness months, but like every month, every day, every day.
Yes. Read our books, tell other people about our books, give us money, give the organizations that support us money. And this is the hard thing is that I'm going to suggest is to take it a step further and to encourage more organizations and also your local politicians to do more to support disabled writers. Whether that is making a phone call, sending a letter, whether you're just letting them know you think it would be a good idea or you're starting a whole campaign. I know that in current times it feels like nothing we say matters to these people. And unfortunately, in some places that's true. But there are still a lot of places where, especially at the local level, it does matter. And it will matter if you say that to, your local school board person, like, hey, you should have disabled authors do visits and you should make this a thing. Or, your local university should do more to make their residencies or whatever programs accessible. Just letting people know that you are, a person who's paying attention to this and that you think it's important is a really big deal. And of course, if you do have more sway, if you are, on some kind of committee or something, really think about how the organization that you're part of is making things more accessible or less accessible, and really think about how you can reframe and expand your attempts to make things more accessible to disabled folks. And also, I'm going to reiterate, give us money.
I love that call to action. One of the most important ones. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. I'm actually gonna harken back to something, Ashley, that you mentioned in your most recent response, which is about how disability is written, right? I know I, for one, as a voracious reader, have read it written well and read it written not so well, right? So I'm wondering what each of your take is on the way that disability is written in more traditional publishing versus self-pub works or independently published works. Is there harm that's ever done? Is it a net positive just if you have representation, right? Or are increasing visibility? Um, does it matter if it's a realistic portrayal of disability or not? Does it matter if it's well researched? Obviously, I have some opinions on that for the audience, but I'm curious what each of you think. And a little bit of a follow up that you're probably anticipating is, do you feel that there's a difference when it's sort of an own voices situation, right? When there are disabled writers writing about disability, whether it's one that they experience themselves or not, um, versus outsiders who are writing about identities that they don't share at all.
I want to caveat this by saying that if you, as a disabled reader, have resonated with a book that most people in the disability community don't like, you're valid, because like disability is not a monolith. I know that there's a very, very popular and controversial book out there right now in the fantasy spaces that a lot of disabled people really, really dislike the way the disability rep was done. But I also know disabled readers who it's the first time they've ever read disability in fantasy, and it was just so, they felt so seen, and like it was so resonant with them, and I think that is so valid. I think that I do think that there is like, we do need to be mindful of avoiding like as writers of avoiding harmful stereotypes, avoiding like tropes that are rooted in eugenics. And I think making sure we're avoiding those, or if we feel the need to present those, like ableism was the real villain all along, doing so with nuance. Um, and I think also like own voices, like authors who are using their writing as an escape, and are exploring these things. Like I think that's super valid. And I also don't want to like discourage non-disabled authors from including disability in your books. Like, yes, let us tell our stories, but also let us see ourselves in books that you're writing, and like don't make us carry the whole load. Um, but like I've already said, disability is not a monolith, and so I think it's always a good idea to include some sensitivity readers, even if you yourself are writing from a place of like experience. I think it's always a good idea to have another disabled person or two read through it and make sure you're not perpetuating any harmful stereotypes or internalized ableism that you didn't mean to. And if you meant to because it's part of the plot and you're going to get there eventually, then okay. But uh but I think I like that we are seeing disability in mainstream books that have done very well. I think we still have a lot of room to grow. And I think that there can be harm done if it's not done with respect and sensitivity to the real life lived experience of disabled people, just like writing any other type of diversity and like any minority or oppressed group, I think. But I think it's still really important that we are included in narratives that are published.
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm very curious which fantasy book is causing the drama right now. I've been so deep into horror lately that I'm just missing the drama entirely, which is probably better for my mental health. But, curiosity killed a cat. Uh, but really, I do think that there's a, there is lots of room for non-disabled people to write stories, including disabled people to various extents. I don't think you should be writing a story that is about the character being disabled, but if your main character happens to be disabled, and that's just a backdrop to the story, that's totally fine as long as you do your research and, get sensitivity readers and always try to get at least two because every disability has so much variation. When I wrote in, one of my books, in my fantasy duology, one of the characters is blinded at the end of the first book, and so I got three sensitivity readers to help me with the second book and his storyline of, having to come to terms with being blind because the reality is that acquiring a significant disability for all of us, it does involve a process of grieving. And, I wanted to be authentic to that and how messy that can be without perpetuating harmful stereotypes. And that's a messy line. And frankly, even, if it is own voices, sometimes you cross it. And sometimes you're going to disagree about where the line is. I am also asexual, and my first novella, which is now out of print, the main character was asexual, and there was a conversation that she had with, her partner about that, where, she effectively had to say that I'm not interested in it. And, the partner had suggested we could, do the sex, like, but she said it in a, you know, like what normal couples do. And I had some people come at me that, that was ace phobia, and I had a really difficult time with it because I can see the argument, but I have always come at it from normal is actually not a thing that I've ever wanted to be. And so depending on, how the conversation is tackled and how it's approached, sometimes if you are telling you are working through your own experience, it's going to be messy and it's going to be done in a way that is going to make some people think you are being acephobic, you know, being ableist, being all of that. And it might even be those things internalized, but it might be that you are coming from a very different perspective and you are trying to tell that story. And that is a very fine line to walk. And I don't want to say you can't walk it, but I do want to say be careful and be aware that that is a place that you can land even when you are writing your own experience. And in fact, that can make it far messier because then you have an attachment to, well, I think not being normal is a good thing. So I think having this conversation about, you know, that is not bad. But I also understand that for a lot of people, they have always wanted to be normal. And that's, you know, you have to be aware that these conversations are going to exist on multiple levels and they're going to have ripple effects. And it's probably going to be a lot worse for you if you don't share that identity because, I mean, at that point, there's just no defense and it probably is something internalized. Um, but if you do have that disability, and especially if that is literally you working through that internalized thing on the page, do be willing to lean into it, but know that leaning into it can cause controversy and disagreements, and you have to be aware of that and be willing to A, explain yourself, and B, figure out where you actually stand and, you know, take that stance.
I think this whole conversation is so interesting because I remember uh doing the autism panel a few weeks ago, and we talked about how uh you know, why do parents of disabled children or parents of autistic children get to tell, you know, those stories ahead of autistic people or ahead of disabled people? And I think, like, you know, it's really important to center who is the one telling the story. And when it becomes this overwhelming narrative of parents of disabled children telling the stories instead of actually disabled people, it does become a problem. I do have some issues with non-disabled authors writing disabled main characters, and that's just for me personally. And I will put down a name because I did have an issue with this, which was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kremer, who wrote a main character with cerebral palsy, and she doesn't have cerebral palsy, and it's a New York Times bestseller. She did hire a sensitivity reader, so like that's good, but like I kind of was like skimming through it and I was like, something about this makes me very uncomfortable because she, you know, she's not writing from her lived experience. And like, I'm fine if she wanted to make that character a side character. And I think that character is a side character in the future books. And that's great. Like, by all means, if you're a non disabled author or if you're not comfortable yet putting your disability in a main character on the page, like, and you want to write a disabled side character, like, please, I'm all for that. But if you're writing a disabled character, not in a way that you're exploring your own identity, but if you don't have that disability like at all, and you're, even if you do hire a sensitivity reader, I do think, I mean, I think in some instances, maybe it's okay, but I think it depends. And I think because her book got so popular that every time I see it now and I see her name, like it just makes me very uncomfortable because I'm like, well, you know, you got this book deal, you got it, and you're on the New York Times bestseller list, but disabled authors are struggling, and parents of disabled children have written about, you know, they're writing about their disabled kids, but disabled authors are struggling to, you know, to query and to are being told that in certain ways that when they describe certain things about their disabilities or chronic illnesses, that it's not realistic when that's their own experience and that is realistic to that person. So I think like I kind of think it kind of depends, but I'm not really comfortable just on a personal level and as a sensitivity reader myself with a non-disabled person writing, or even a disabled person. Like if I were to write about a character, I'm not blind. If I were to write a character who was blind or who was deaf, I would make them a side character and make sure I got a sensitivity reader or two if I could afford it, to make sure that that representation is good. If I was going forward with that story, sometimes we write stories and we don't always go forward with them. I had that issue with a script where I was writing this very intense script about eugenics before COVID, and I wrote all these different characters with different disabilities, and I was thinking, oh, I should probably get, at some point, if I do go forward with this script, get sensitivity readers or get people to, read it, but I never ended up moving forward with it because it was such a dark, intense subject, but it had other characters with disabilities that I don't have. They just weren't the main character. It's the reason why I say that, and the reason I know my opinion can sometimes be unpopular is because when you have a disability or a chronic illness, and everyone's experience is different with that disability or chronic illness, there are nuances that people won't understand. Even even if two different people with the same disability or chronic illness write about a character, they're gonna write different. They're not gonna be, it's gonna be similar, but it's not gonna be the exact replica because they're writing through the lens of their own experience. So a disabled reader is gonna see, oh, I resonated with that, but they're gonna resonate with it differently because of those two authors writing about their different, very different experiences through a different lens. And I just don't feel like if I was writing, a character outside of my lived experience or whatever, like I have plenty of side characters, like in my dissertation novel and in my other novels and scripts and whatever that have different backgrounds that are Asian or, other backgrounds. But I know that, hey, in the back of my mind, I'm probably going to need a sensitivity reader or someone to, see that this hopefully is that I'm portraying this respectfully and that I'm, having as much sort of empathy and sensitivity, but also, that I got some of the nuances because it's not just disability that has the nuances, but it's also different cultures and religions and, sexual orientations and things like that too. And like Diana was saying, I think a lot of disabled people are asexual. I am as well. And I think that there are nuances with that, and there are nuances with, all different kinds of backgrounds. So I think it's just something to be aware of. And it's just important that just because a few people have the same disability or background, you're still experiencing the world through, each person is through a very different lens, and that needs to be like honored and respected. So how is the best way to do that?
Yeah, I do also want to touch on something else that Lara said, which is, the issue that is, which to my mind is it's an issue that comes after writing the story you want to write, but there is very much the issue of if you are seeking traditional publishing and you are a non-disabled person writing about a disabled main character, you have to understand that traditional publishing only publishes, this small handful of books about disabled characters every year, and that you are therefore taking a slot from a disabled author. And that's a big deal. I think if you're going to be doing self-publishing or even small press, there's a little more wiggle room because you're not taking one of, three spots. I mean, there are whole small presses devoted to publishing disabled stories, and so that's a little different. But if you are going for big five, if you're going for that, traditional publishing, those publishers really do only publish a handful of disabled people every year, a handful of disabled stories every year. And every disabled story that they publish that is by an abled author is an opportunity taken away from a disabled person. Also, autism moms writing books about their children are just bad people.
I love seeing the snaps and the head nods. Um, so I want to switch gears a little bit, maybe the most I've done throughout this panel. We've talked a lot about it's hard being chronically ill, it's hard being disabled. And disability is not a monolith, as each of you have kind of spoken to in your own words, right, in your most recent response, but as Ashley named very clearly. Um, so I'm curious, what unexpected opportunities have you been open to or have you received as a disabled writing professional or in the other professional spaces you're in? What unexpected wins have you had as a result of being a disabled person?
I'm gonna just say the community at large. Like we have the greatest community. I have to like I in like 2021 or 2022 there was some like pitch event and we were trying there's a whole bunch of us trying to like uplift disabled voices and we created like a whole like disabled authors Discord. It's kind of a little bit quiet now, but like it still exists. So like from there I was able to meet so many other like disabled authors and like then was able to meet some other ace authors and like I have just been able to like meet the coolest people from being a chronically ill author and finding other chronically ill authors because we're some really, really cool people. And I think it's given me some really cool opportunities within publishing. Like I've got that middle grade that I said I was querying that I did end up getting an agent for that one a few months ago and it's on sub right now, so fingers crossed. And I was able to be in a disability and fantasy anthology that came out in January from that and like with some of my friends were in that one too, which was really cool to like that we all got in and have just met the coolest people and had the coolest opportunities to like network and make friends and like get to read other people's books and writing and it just we have such a diverse and talented and awesome group within the community and I think that's been one of the coolest parts of this, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. The community of disabled writers is just so amazing. I am a contributor to the Spoonie Authors Network run by Kat Gordon, who is just the most lovely person you'll ever meet in your life. And, you know, it's just it's so nice to not be alone and we do so much to lift each other up and it's been really great. And the other thing that's been really great, and I mean, this is arguably an opportunity that I created for myself, but just, having weeknight writers and hearing from disabled people how much it means to them that I'm still hosting virtual events, all these years later. Like, yes, our first con was in 2020 because that was just like the moment to do a virtual con, but we kept going and we've kept all of our events virtual and, a lot of our events are either free or very affordable. We keep things in like the $10 to $20 range as much as possible. And it's been so nice to hear from disabled people that that matters to them and, that it doesn't just matter to me, but that the work I'm doing actually matters to other people. And, being able to help other disabled people and give them opportunities. I've, been able to have people on their first panel and people who are terrified of being on panels have been on Weeknight Writers panels. And it is the coolest feeling the way that we lift each other up. And I would like to have a more functional physiological system, but then I wouldn't have all these amazing people in my life. So it's a trade-off. And I think it's mostly worked out pretty well for me.
I'm gonna sort of dovetail. I know we're supposed to be talking about positive things here, but I'm gonna backtrack a little bit in that I think for me, the writing community has, mostly been very positive, but I came from and like the writing community online has been a good experience for me. And I, grew up in fandom and fanfic, so I was kind of used to like those online, communities. And as someone who still does, occasionally write fanfic, like I know how valuable that is. But I also do want to bring awareness to the fact that just because you're disabled does not mean you are a good person. And as someone who I was an undergrad at Berkeley, and I experienced some of the worst, not just ableism, but uh, assaults and being made fun of because I didn't drink, and yeah, sexual assault, getting things stolen from me, getting made fun of by other disabled people who weren't even disabled people of color. And like I don't think that that's talked about enough. Like even in writing spaces, that there can be bullying and jealousy and like terror. Like there can be wonderful things, and I acknowledge that fully, but there can also be really, really awful things, and people get jealous of each other and they do terrible things to each other, and that needs to be acknowledged. And I don't know how to, reconcile, like both. There is no both sides, but like different areas of that, because some things can be so positive where you have these online events and communities. And like I'm in a, COVID conscious author Discord, that very lucky to be a part of that, and have made friends from, Twitter, even though it's falling apart, and like very lucky to do that. But and Blue Sky and all that, but also like we need to acknowledge that there are, disabled people who aren't going to be looking out for our well-being, who are, whether inside the writing community or outside of it. And we like that's not the kind of people that we need, but they exist. And I don't have any solutions for like how to navigate those kinds of things, the bullying and the infighting within our communities, because there is so much of it. Yeah, and I do see it a little bit in the writing community, but like I keep my account locked, so I'm not really like part of the drama. But it seems like there's so many, there's so much drama and there's so much things. But I think to just like, be nicer to each other, to have, to not put disability in a hierarchy, and to have, help others with creating opportunities and donating when possible and things like that, and making it accessible for other disabled people. And there's no reason to, not be like there's just like you don't have to be a shitty person. You can just be like a decent person. And I feel like that's not just in regular disability communities, that also can come up in writing communities. That's why I brought it up. And I think I don't have any solutions for how to, navigate that. But in talking about how wonderful that communities can be, and, bringing us all together for anthology opportunities and everything, there is also, people saying, oh, but you're doing this and I'm not, and stuff. And there's just like, we're all on our own path. So it's important to remember that, like, for those of us who are querying and traditionally publishing, like, we're each going to have our own querying story and our own, difficulties with that. So like for my, opportunity with being Maddie, who is a friend of mine, who is the author editor, is also a disabled, chronically ill author. And she said, do you want to be in this anthology? And I was like, sure. Like, but then there was another anthology that came up with her also, that's coming out later this year, and I submitted for it, and I didn't get, I wasn't selected for that particular opportunity, and that's okay. And like those things happen, but like part of that community is just like being, aware of like opportunities and like uplifting other people, and like seeing, like Ashley is in the Artifice and Access anthology that I saw, and stuff. And like, it's about having those kinds of opportunities, or saying, hey, I thought of you when I saw this, and just sending a quick message to your writer friends and just being like, hey, I thought of you when I saw this. Or Diana having weekend writers and having, those different panels and different kinds of things. Like, that's what it's about, to have community, not like to have infighting and, all this drama and all this stuff. But I just feel really, as grateful as I am for the opportunities. I think I also wanted to use this as an opportunity to be like, there is this infighting and there is this thing going on as well, and that needs to be acknowledged, because, like, that's a very real thing, and it does exist.
No, thank you for naming that, Lara. And I think, Lara, to your point, right? Like, rising tides lift all boats. I know that's cliche, but it's true, right? When we support others, when we build solidarity, and we are decent to each other, that's good for everybody, right? So thank you for naming that. I think that's really important. At this point, I wish we could talk forever. I am loving absolutely every comment that has come through from each of you as our panelists. If you, and maybe we'll just go in alphabetical order. So Ashley, Diana, and Lara, if you'll close us out. But if any of you have final thoughts, farewells, calls to action, shameless, absolutely shameless self-promotion. I am an upholder of shameless self-promotion. If you want to share your socials, website, I'll be taking notes, and I'll make sure that our audience has that as well. But Ashley, if you'd kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank Right Hive for letting us have this panel and talk about this, because it's such a this I accessibility in publishing is so like near and dear to my heart. So I'm just really glad I could be on this. I am on most socials as at Ash in the Ashes. I'm like Ash. She's on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter anymore. But uh, I the anthology I was talking about was Artifice and Access, a disability and fantasy anthology, edited by Ella T. Holmes. Definitely go check it out. It's available online wherever books are sold. And then if you want to add my 2026 young adult fantasy debut, Child of the Dragon, it is on Goodreads and Storygraph and Indie Story Geek. So you can go add that to your TBRs.
I am Dianna Gunn. Both of those are with 2 N's, and I can be found at Dianna L. Gunn on Blue Sky. I'm theoretically in other places, but really I'm not actually in those places. I just have like placeholder accounts, so Blue Sky it is. And I just released a horror collection called Killer Debt, which is actually a collection of murders of real people who paid me to write them custom death scenes. So that was a lot of fun. And unlike other fiction books, I cannot actually put the disclaimer at the front that says any resemblance to real people is unintentional. No, these are real people, but they all gave me permission to murder them, and they all enjoyed it very much. So yeah, Killer Debt just came out, and yeah, and I also run Weeknight Writers, which you can find at weeknightwriters.com, and we do all kinds of virtual events um, for authors. And yeah, and I want to thank Right Hive for having me, and for I think, you know, one could argue that my events are in competition, but realistically, a rising tide lifts all boat, and we are colleagues, not competition. So I'm really glad that they looked at my application and didn't see that, I run Weeknight Writers and go, "Oh, we're competition." They went, "No, you are a colleague and someone who has something to add here." So yeah, thanks, Right Hive, and thanks everyone who has been watching.
Would also like to thank Right Hive. I've been doing the Right Hive conference since I think 2023, and it's always been great every single year. It's been so much fun. Very thankful for virtual conferences. Please wear a mask. If you have stopped wearing masks, please go forth and wear an N95 or K9 N95, or a P100 if you can afford it. And if there are mask blocks in your area or in your country, you can get free masks from them. And please, mask to protect your health and the health of those around you, especially if you have a disability or chronic illness yourself. I can be found at True Cherry Girl. It's TRU Cherry Girl. There is no E. Yes, it's from a TV show. You can ask me all about it because it's one of my special interests. I'm pretty much on all the platforms on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. I don't know, there might be a couple others out there, but those are like the big ones. So just wanted to say thank you, and you can find the anthology Being Ace, which I have a short story in. My story is a young adult thriller about a disabled girl with cerebral palsy and hyperacusis who has 48 hours to save her girlfriend from an anonymous enemy. And it was a Lambda Literary Award finalist for 2024. And you can find it on all the platforms, all the bookshop, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. And the last piece of shameless self promo that I will do is I am teaching in mid-July, so a few days before this panel, I am teaching a 6-week workshop through Women on Writing online on writing disabled characters in fiction. It is for primarily for young adult fiction, and I have an entire extremely vetted list that I've kept since 2018 of disabled young adult authors writing disabled main characters that you will get if you sign up for this class. I would love to have other disabled, writers sign up for my class. I taught it last year and I had a few students and they loved it and I got some wonderful evaluations. So I would love to have some disabled students sign up for the class. It's in the afternoons on, I believe it's on Tuesdays. That's going to be live, but it's going to be a really good class. Taught it once before, and I would love to have, more students and share my love of some of my favorite books with my fellow disabled writers. And we could talk more, have more conversations like this, and talk about disabled characters and writing and how important that is, especially in these times. So thank you.
Thank you all. Just as a quick closing, as a voracious reader and reviewer who is also a disabled professional in another field entirely, I know how important this conversation is. So thank you to each of our panelists. When access and equity are centered, we all win, right? Rising tides lift all boats. I'm always fascinated by the representations of disability in writing and have really enjoyed hearing each of your perspectives as a professional with disabilities in the writing space. So thank you very much. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for joining us for Accessibility and Publishing, Removing Barriers for Professionals with Disabilities. Thank you again for being such wonderful panelists. Big thanks to WriteHive for hosting us. Keep those questions coming in the chat for our panelists.